kick things off, the reason that we've created this webinar series over the next few weeks is based on the last 5 years of feedback and experience. So over the last 5 years, we've visited 30 hospices or so, up and down the country. We've attended the Hospice UK conference as a business as well 4 times, and then the first Hospice UK Tech Conference, which was hosted in Manchester earlier this year in February, which we might have met a few of you at, was also a good opportunity for us to get some feedback. So naturally, the progression was to create the webinar series. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you get something from the series itself. And again, the main reasons really is speaking to the hospices and the sectors and all of you sort of people across the 5 years, is that hospice organisations tend to operate in silo across different departments. They're using all sorts of weird and wonderful software that we found when we've done things like IT review. So it's just trying to bring that all together and try and figure out where 365 and Microsoft can be utilised for them services. So yeah, we sort of took that feedback on board as well, which is why we put this together. So just a quick introduction to myself and Mike. So Mike, I'll let you go first, if that's okay.
Sure. So I'm Mike Owen. I'm a Modern Workplace Director with Yoko 10. And what that basically means is we specialise in Office 365, the collaboration side of things, with SharePoint and Microsoft Teams, and try and get customers to get the most out of it, rather than just sort of spending the license fee and then having so many other sort of products and solutions in the mix. Gav.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Mike. So for those that I haven't met, I'm the Managed Services Consultant here at CT. I've worked at CT for nearly 5 years now, with the focus being on the hospice sector. So a lot of you have probably already met at any of the conferences or actually on site. And my role ultimately is to find out how hospices are using technology, where the gaps are, and try and help fill them gaps wherever possible. So yeah, that's just a bit about myself. Just quickly, there's one more quick introduction slide that we just wanted to cover off. Again, some of you may already know CT, but just a basic intro. We're a managed service provider, a technology partner for businesses and organisations and hospices. Been around for 22 years now, 23 years this year. We work with over 30 hospices, I think it is, over the course of them sort of last 5 years, where the sector focus has been on palliative care. And we support all sorts of organisations across the UK, from head office in Chesterfield in Derbyshire, right in the middle of the country. But we've also got additional branches in Leicester and Dorset as well. The fundamental part of our technology service is underpinned by our strategic partnership approach. So we see ourselves as extensions to not just IT, but also board level management teams, ground level staff as well. So that's our approach as a service provider. The 4 core services that we provide are IT support, managed services, cybersecurity solutions, cloud services and solutions, and also communications like phone systems, broadband connectivity, things like HSN, breakout and things like that as well for the sector. So just a little bit about CT. I'm going to sit in the background now and let Mike cover off the next few slides and get into the interesting stuff. So over to you, Mike.
All right. Okay, so by way of agenda, we're just going to have a quick intro into all of the services and capabilities within Microsoft 365. We're also going to touch on something quite important, which is around the governance side of things, because all too often we see organizations sort of have Office 365 and start using the applications and then end up in a little bit of a mess because we haven't really thought about how we're going to be using it. We'll then move on to a bit of a comparison, because the most common 2 licenses that we see being used is either the Office 365 E3 license or a small business premium license. So what are the differences? Why would it go for one versus the other? And then we're going to sort of have a little look at using Teams for collaboration, not just that kind of day-to-day working on files for sort of a back office function, but then also how might we sort of plug other applications into Teams and really get the most of it. And as Gavin said, even though we've got Q&A at the end, if you do have questions as we're going along, I will pause at the end of each section. I will just have a quick check, answer any other questions in context of the material as we go. So in terms of the applications that you have available, there's actually a huge amount that you get for your license fee. Obviously, you've got the Office applications, the Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, all of those that you've got available to use. But then you've got all the services that they rely on. So Exchange Online to host your email and SharePoint to host your files. And those are kind of almost rolled out by default by organizations. Emails, the one thing that every organization will deploy first because it's a big cost saving. SharePoint and OneDrive, normally fairly soon afterwards, just because it enables a lot of remote working, hybrid working capabilities. Obviously, post-COVID, we've seen a huge boom in platforms like Microsoft Teams. So Teams is available as part of the license as well, and it really brings together a lot of the applications that already existed within Office 365, but it brings it under one application. Historically, we had something called Office 365 groups. Now, even prior to that, actually, if I wanted to have a number of people working together, I would have to set up a shared mailbox in Exchange. I would have to set up a file share location so that we can store our files together. I might also have some task management, task planning applications somewhere else. And I've got to make sure that everybody has got access to all of those different applications to do our project work or kind of day-to-day coordinations. Now, Microsoft changed that by introducing Office 365 groups, because instead of having administrators create 3 different areas and having to make sure the permissions are correct across those 3 different areas, Office 365 now allows me to define who I want to work together, and it automatically grants them permission to Exchange for shared mailboxes, into SharePoint for file sharing, for Planner for task management, and a lot of other applications. Now, Teams evolved that because I would still have to go to 3 different places to see that information. But with Teams, now that is one central application where I can see all of the conversations and have meetings such as this. I can also see files in the context of those conversations as well. So we're not sort of having to switch applications and switch context in order to get the whole picture. But Teams can also be used to bring in other applications. And because it's used on desktops and we can use it on mobiles, now it starts to open up lots of other possibilities for people that don't necessarily sit at a desk all day. We also have something referred to as the Power Platform Suite included as part of Microsoft 365. Now, some of these applications you will automatically have access to under your license, and some of them, depending on what you want to do with them, might be an added extra license. In particular, thinking about Power BI here, so to really get the best out of Power BI, it does become an add-on license. But the Power Platform Suite is incredibly useful for people that understand the process, understand the problem within their area of an organization, and want to try and improve it, to automate it. Maybe create an application that sort of that I can use on a mobile. Now, we're actually going to go into more detail on the Power Platform Suite in webinar 3. So it's in, I think, about 3 weeks' time. So we'll cover that in more detail then. We also have this application called Microsoft Intune, or now referred to as Microsoft Endpoint. But this is about protecting the devices that you work on. Because we're all much more hybrid and working from home and working from many devices potentially, we need to make sure as an organization that our sensitive information doesn't spill over into our personal lives, doesn't inadvertently get shared elsewhere and things like that. So we need to have control of those devices to really protect our organizations in this hybrid working world. Now, it kind of goes hand in hand with the next one, with Microsoft Purview. So Microsoft Purview is the collective name for all of the data security and data compliance tools. Now, whereas Microsoft Intune focuses on the applications and the devices you use, Microsoft Purview focuses on the actual data itself. So if I need to make sure that we're keeping certain information for compliance reasons, for regulatory compliance, there are features within Purview that will let me do that. There's also features within Purview that can allow me to share content outside of the organization, but still maintain control of it. And I'll show you a quick demo of this later, but we're also going to be covering this in webinar 2. So next week, we'll go sort of more deep dive into the compliance features that are available. Now, the next set of tools that you may have sort of heard of is this idea of the Viva suite. And being perfectly honest, a lot of these applications already existed. It's just the Microsoft Marketing Engine bringing all of these applications into Teams and making them easier for people to access. So we've got things like the Viva Connections, so that can show you your intranet directly within Teams. We've got Viva Engage, so if I want to have open conversations throughout the whole of my organization and crowdsource ideas from sort of around the organization on improvements or whatever it might be. There's a tool within Viva Engage that really helps, tool within Viva Suite that can really help with employee engagement. We've then got a number of other applications which we find some organizations haven't heard of, didn't know even existed. So things like Microsoft Bookings. I want to be able to schedule appointments or meetings or have a way that shows all of the availability that I have or a team has. So Microsoft Bookings can allow people to book appointments, to sort of automatically create meetings for you. And Microsoft Stream, that's video playback. This is how do I take this really high fidelity video and be able to play that back regardless of the device that I'm using. If I'm sitting in an office trying to watch a sort of really high res video, I'm probably going to have a very good experience because maybe I'm connected into the network. But if I try and watch that same video in a ward or on a mobile and somewhere on a break, well, now I'm reliant on either the Wi-Fi being up to scratch or having a mobile signal sort of that will enable that. So Microsoft Stream starts to change the resolution of that video to make it appropriate for the device. So it becomes a much better viewing experience. We've also got Microsoft Forms in the mix. Now, Forms, well, they used to be a product that Microsoft had all around their electronic forms, and now that I've said that, the name totally has escaped me. I'm sure it'll come back. But Forms is very much a simplified data capture forms. So the old product was InfoPath. I knew it would come back. So Forms is very simplified data capture. So think about if you use SurveyMonkey at the moment. Well, Forms does the same thing as SurveyMonkey. You can go and design a form to capture whatever information it is you need to capture, we can then bring that into the likes of SharePoint or bring it into Excel, and then actually do something with that data, go and notify people about it, or work on it in other ways. And then had to, because there were so many, I was running out of room on the slide. So I've kind of put this other classification in the bottom right, but this includes things like planner. So planner and to do, they've now become merged, but this is all around task management. To do used to be your personal task manager, and it would go and look in your inbox for any email that you have flagged and say, you must have a to do around this. But we've also got Planner for team task management. We've got Sway for things like newsletters and online magazines. We've got Whiteboard. So if you've got online meetings with people working in different locations, Whiteboard is very handy for noting down ideas, putting sticky notes on it and sort of brainstorming that for that workshop, that meeting. And we've also got something called Loop. Now, Loop becomes, it's an evolution of document collaboration, which I will show you shortly. And the one big application that isn't on here, basically because it's an add-on, but we are going to cover, is this new thing called Copilot. So we're covering Copilot in webinar 4, but Copilot effectively is starting to overlay the majority of these applications in one form or another. So with all of those applications, all of those possibilities for working in your organization, we've now got a bit of a challenge. How do I actually manage all of this stuff? How do I stop people from creating so many teams? I don't know what's important anymore. I don't know what the authoritative content is. So we have this natural sprawl, if you like, of content, growing SharePoint sites or teams. And if we don't manage that, well, now that affects sort of data compliance problems. We might have the same duplicate data, so it's affecting productivity. We've got lots of sort of potential hidden costs around that kind of security side of things as well. So we really need to look at how are we going to manage that side of things. Just as a little side note, Microsoft recently did a presentation. They were talking about organizations are adding approximately 200 petabytes of new content into SharePoint every month. So that's more than 2 billion new documents are actually being added on a daily basis. So it's just a phenomenal amount of information that's going into the service. So if we've got that at this grand scale, how do we control it within your organization? We've then got the safety, security sort of side of things to consider. Because the one thing that Microsoft 365 is really going to help with is this idea of collaboration. You might work with other hospices or other organizations such as the NHS, and we're saying, well, how can we do that in a safe and secure way, given that this is hosted in the cloud, it's hosted by Microsoft? So what protections can we put in place to do that, to make sure data isn't being leaked, we're not sharing inadvertently with the wrong people? And the third big challenge that we've got is user adoption. And it's a fundamental challenge that every organization has, because as humans, we don't really like change. We like to work with what we know, and if we're saying, actually, you need to do something different, you need to work in a different way, well, you've really got to kind of sell the benefits to people to make sure they understand, well, why do you want me to do this? What's in it for me? And what are the benefits for the organization? So you'll find that you've probably heard of the term shadow IT, where users resort to these kind of unauthorized tools or unauthorized apps because either they don't understand that we've already got that in Microsoft 365, or because they find it too difficult to use the tools in Office 365. So it's about awareness and training and making sure that we're not missing those opportunities. So in order to manage these kind of big challenges, this is where that idea of governance comes in. Now, I always used to kind of use governance as being the kind of the rules of engagement, almost the kind of, what do I use and sort of when do I use it? So we need governance in there to help us provide those rules to make sure everything stays secure, stays organized. By doing that, we're going to be reducing our risks. We're also going to be enhancing our productivity. I know where things are stored, and it doesn't matter sort of if I've got more teams and things, because we want to control some of that as well. So a really good governance strategy is going to make things safer overall. It's going to keep that sensitive information protected, and it's going to help us work in a more efficient way. So we've got lots of different areas to consider when you're thinking about governance. So with all the tools that we've got, there's probably 4 or 5 different ways we could do task management. We can create tasks in Outlook, in Planner, and To Do, in Microsoft Project if you've got that much. You could create tasks in SharePoint as well, but what's important is how you, as an organization, want to use these tools. It's possible to turn off some of these tools and say, we're just not ready for some of this. We're maybe not ready for Viva, so let's turn off access to those tools that you're not ready for yet. Obviously, Microsoft leaves it all turned on because they want you to use it, but everyone progresses at a different pace. So if there's too much, you can turn it off, and that's absolutely fine. We also need people to understand their kind of roles and responsibilities within the organization. Should I be able to go and create new teams, or should someone else be doing that on my behalf? Should there be an approval process? Maybe we can use the Power Platform to have some automated approval and sort of process to create new teams. But I need to know what I should and shouldn't be able to do, rather than leaving everything turned on. We've then also got lots of technical policies that we can go and apply. We've got things like we can enforce tagging conventions. And by tags, I'm talking about kind of metadata, the equivalent of hashtags in social media. Because if I've got reports all over the place, I need to understand what kind of report is this. So it'll help me identify those year-end reports, time card reports, or whatever it is. And we can use tags to do that. We might also want to look at the data lifecycle. We see a lot of sprawl where teams have been created because it's the new thing. We're kind of experimenting and trying things out. But unless we've got some kind of life cycle around it, we're going to keep everything forever. And then we start to get into trouble, either from a storage cost perspective or from a compliance perspective, because we're keeping data longer than we should. We can also use things like application policies to turn off certain features that we're not happy with people using. But part of SharePoint is obviously sharing. It's in the name. But we might not want everybody to be able to share content from our organization to an organization outside. So we can look at how we control some of those application policies to make sure that people are working in a way that helps the organization, protects them from inadvertently sharing or working in ways that we don't want them to work. And finally, yes, we've got those compliance and security policies. In fact, I will actually show you some of those capabilities in just a moment. So with all of that said, let's look at what we've got within the E3 license versus the small business premium license. Now, I realize I have kind of mixed things a little bit. You'll hear Office 365 and Microsoft 365. And from a license perspective, there are actually two different license SKUs. So Office 365 is the tool, the suite of tools and applications that are available in the browser, but you can also download the Office applications. Microsoft 365 includes all of Office 365, but it adds on Windows 11 Desktop, and it adds on the Intune device and application management suite as well. So the Microsoft 365 license is more expensive because it's got Windows built into it. But Office 365, well, we're talking about £18 a month here. They've unbundled, if that's the right word, they decoupled Teams from all of the licenses now because they're looking to try and create Teams as a product that will compete with Zoom and Google Chat, I think the specific product. But, so all of the licenses don't actually include Teams, and Teams is an added bundle, an add-on feature for about £4 a month per user now. So for an E3, total cost including Teams is about £22, whereas Business Premium is about £18. But it's when you get into the detail that you realise there are some other differences involved. So from a main differences perspective, obviously the E3 license is geared towards enterprises. So it can be used with unlimited numbers of users, whereas the Business Premium license, we're limited up to 300 users for that particular license SKU. Now, if your organization happens to be 350 users, let's say, you don't just have to have E3 by default. Not everyone is going to need the capabilities provided by a Business Premium license. Not in the scope of this, but you could add on things like frontline user licenses. So people who still need a mailbox and they still need personal storage, but they're not going to need Office sitting on a laptop somewhere. So this way you can mix and match some of those licenses to make sure it fits for your organization, and not just say, we've got over 300 users, therefore we must have an E3 license. The second differentiator is around the storage side of things. So from an email and file storage perspective, the Business Premium license does have less storage, again, because it's geared to a smaller organization. You can still buy additional SharePoint storage. Let's say you've got lots of pre-recorded videos and things like that, and they take up a lot of space. So even if you've got a smaller number of users, you can still buy additional SharePoint storage if needed. Now, the next two differentiators are around the kind of data loss prevention and compliance policies. Obviously, with the Business Premium, we get a basic set of capabilities here. So data loss prevention is all about making sure your data stays within your organization, and we're not inadvertently sending it via email or sharing it through SharePoint or OneDrive or Teams where we shouldn't be doing so. Now, the advanced features that we've got in E3 will kind of really sort of provide a lot of granularity around how you can control those policies. Similarly with the compliance features that you don't get within Business Premium are more around e-discovery. So you might have had situations where someone said, you need to tell me everything you know about me, here are my details, and you have to sort of provide that information back to them. And the e-discovery tools are really there for huge volumes of data for that regulatory compliance, so that I can basically deliver it as a pack of information, maybe to a court hearing and things like that. You still have search features that can look for that information within Business Premium, but some of the e-discovery tools, the regulatory compliance tools, they're not included. And the last one, and quite an important one for a small business, is that you have Intune as part of your license. It's not the full version of it all, but you're still able to go and sort of control what people have in terms of the applications that they use on personal devices, or controlling how an organization-owned laptop is going to be is going to be configured, it's going to be updated automatically, and things like that. So certainly a handy sort of set of tools to have. Unfortunately, with an E3, an Office 365 E3, it's going to be an extra add-on per user per month cost. So I thought it'd be useful just to kind of show you some of the sort of security and compliance tools, just to give you a quick flavour of it, hopefully to entice you in for next week's webinar as well. So what I've got, I'm just going to switch to a demo. Okay, so here you can see I am signed in as Lynn Robbins. So Lynn is a HR advisor, but I've got a document here that Adele has sent me. So if I go and click on this document, I can see it's a sort of a basic outline of a job description here. But within Word, and this is for Word applications sitting on your desktop, as well as in the browser, as well as in Teams, I can define this idea of sensitivity labels. And if you think, historically, we might have had a front sheet on certain documents, certain reports, which say this is confidential, or this is internal only, those kind of watermarked documents. Well, this is what sensitivity labels can provide for us. So here I've got 5 different sensitivity settings. Public being very open, I might be able to do whatever I like with it. It might be marketing information, sales information, whereas if it's confidential and internal only, well, now I want that to be watermarked, and I want it to be restricted just to people within the organization. So I can see by clicking on that, it's applied certain settings. I've got this new header at the top, but in the background, it's also providing kind of like a little security blanket around this document. If I were to send this document outside of this domain to somebody else, they would be forced to provide a username and password to access it. If they don't have a username and password for my demo environment here, they won't be able to access it. It's secured and locked. This is not the same as putting a password on an Excel spreadsheet like we're able to do to secure that. This can also define the permissions that somebody has. I might want to be able to share this with an external party, but I don't want them to edit it. Or maybe I don't want them to be able to print it or copy and paste. All of those capabilities can be built into these sensitivity labels. Now, if I change that sensitivity, I've classified it incorrectly. So I'm going to revert it back to being public. Well, now this is saying to me, hang on, why are you doing this? Why are you taking an internal document and now making it public again and taking those restrictions off? So I can provide a justification. Now in the background, all of these changes that I'm making to the document are being audited in the audit log. So if for any reason we do have a problem where data has left the organization when it shouldn't have done, I can track back over the last 3 months and see what's gone on, what happened to that document. Now, another aspect, I mentioned it briefly earlier, this idea of data loss prevention. So if I start a new email, and I'll send, right, I'm going to send Gavin's details to myself. So here's his national insurance number. It isn't. That's fine. But this could be. Oh, there we go. Yeah, 1, 2, something like that. It's a known format for national insurance numbers. So I'm going to send that outside of the organisation, and what we'll see is that I've got a data loss prevention policy in place that says, oh, hang on, your message actually conflicts with the policy we've got here. I recognise this as a national insurance number. You can't send that outside. That's personal identifiable information. This could be NHS numbers. It could be patient IDs, things like that. You can define your own, but Microsoft's also got quite a few sort of inbuilt that we could use if we wanted to. And the third kind of compliance rule that we'll look at is the idea of retention. So here I am within the human resources team. I'm looking at the recruitment documents, and I can see that I've got retention labels here around job profiles and management information and survey data. That doesn't look right to me. So I'm going to select this, open the information pane for this document. And down here, I've got this idea of being able to apply a label. So these retention labels that we can go and define to say, if you label this as all policies and procedures and processes, this document must be retained for 6 years. So if you've got financial information, that's 7-year reporting sort of process. You can't delete certain documents in that case. So when we apply a retention label onto it, this will then secure that document, but as an end user, I can still delete this if I wanted to. In the background, it's being retained for compliance reasons, so that it doesn't get deleted before 6 years' time. So these retention policies, the sensitivity labels that I showed you on the document, and the data loss prevention are just some of the capabilities we've got within Microsoft Purview. We'll go into more depth sort of in next week's webinar. Just while I get the deck back, are there any questions at this point, Gav?
Yeah, we've got a couple. If I fire one, two, you might be able me 2 seconds. I think probably from the first set of slides, it was around sway. So what's sway, and when in the hospice sector would they typically use this?
So yeah, sway was something that Microsoft brought out, well, it's got to be almost 10 years ago. And at first, people saw it as a replacement for PowerPoint. It's not really that. It hasn't got the same functionality. So Sway is really good for the kind of newsletters, online sort of online newsletters and magazines and things like that. It's all presented in the browser, and it's just sort of one long stream, kind of like your own web page that you're designing, very much in a drag and drop sort of process. So handy for that side of things, all stored sort of online within the environment, and you can add it into emails, sort of there's a link to an email so people can see the latest evolution and things like that. Any more, or should we keep going?
Yeah, probably worth just keep going at this point, I think.
All right, no problem. Okay, so let's move on to some Teams specific sort of information here. So obviously within Teams, there's 3 main sort of pillars, if you like. This idea of kind of meetings and messaging and high velocity chat. You can still do communication via email, but we're not necessarily going to be checking email all the time. This is much more the kind of the organizational WhatsApp, if you will, but also extending to online meetings, webinars, hybrid working, sort of getting together in that way. Now, the second sort of core pillar is the collaboration that goes on. So as you saw briefly in the demo just, within Teams, I can access files. And this is great from a departmental perspective or a project perspective, a group of people working together. I can have a conversation about what we're working on. I can sort of have the files right next to me. I can reference people, share it to people. So it's bringing it all into one location. Instead of having my chat within Teams and then files somewhere else, maybe a file share, and we've still got them over there. You can bring them all together. It's effectively creating a SharePoint site that is directly connected to that team. So everything you can do in SharePoint, you can now do from Teams. There was a little bit of a kind of disconnect early on, but all of that has now been sort of brought, there's now complete feature parity, pretty much. The third pillar is this idea of connected apps, experiences, and sort of being able to plug in different things. So subject to some of those IT governance policies that I touched on earlier, you'll be able to add in other applications onto Teams. So that can be Microsoft-specific applications. Maybe I want to see all of the document approvals that have gone through. So connecting approvals in. I'm going to touch on that in webinar 3. But we might also have third-party apps that we want. So maybe for whatever reason, we're currently using a third-party task management tool. We want to plug that in, show it within the context of Teams. Well, you can do that subject to Teams policies. Now, the one that I'm going to show you, which I think is of more interest to hospices in particular, is an app called Shifts. It's a Microsoft app that's included as part of your license, and it's all around roster management, being able to sort of schedule people and groups of people to sort of work in particular areas of the organization. So let's just switch back to the demo environments, and we'll briefly show you some about sharing information, the collaboration side of things, and then I'll give you a brief overview of the Shifts app. Okay, so this time I'm going to, so this time I'm going to be myself. And what we've now got here is, obviously I've been chatting to my colleague Lynn about this recruitment policy. So what I can say to her is, well, I need some help with a new job spec that I'm putting together. So let's just grab this. Okay. So I'm just going to send her a message. Well, okay. Can you help amending this new IT job spec? Now, I want to make sure she's looking at the right one. So I can then go in and attach a file. And I can see that I've already started working on this. So I'm going to attach that IT job technician role in, and I'll send it to Lynn. Okay. Now, if I switch over to being Lynn again. Okay. So here I am as Lynn, and I can go to the chat. And I can see that Michael has sent to this information. Okay, so if I click on that that document, let's just add that. Teams is now opening the document directly in directly in Teams for me. What I'm also going to do in the background, though, is also open the document with my own persona. And what you can see is if I start typing as Michael, you can see in the document here, I've got a little purple marker. So I can work on this document at exactly the same time that Lynn is working on the document, which is quite hard to do with one pair of hands, to be honest. But I can sort of make those edits at the same time that edits are being made elsewhere in the document. So very handy if we've got spreadsheets that we need multiple people to be able to edit at the same time. If you've got documents that you're working on with other areas of the business or other people, we don't need to have that idea of the document's locked now because Michael's working in it and you've just got to wait. You don't need to do that anymore. You can turn that off, though. There is always going to be certain scenarios, official policy libraries, things like that, where you absolutely must have an official check-in, check-out process, and you can't have multiple people editing. It might be chaos and things like that. So you can turn it off if needs be. But this is working collaboratively on documents, which works quite nicely. Now, I'm going to switch back to my my own persona, and if I just close out of this document, I'm going to have a look at my. I've set up a team for hospice resourcing. Connected to that, I've got shifts. If you don't see shifts in team, you're able to click on the ellipsis here and you can search for it at the top. Now, because I've already got it pinned, I don't need to do anything here, but you can right click on it and it would say pin if you need to. So I'm looking at shifts now from the perspective of someone who needs to organize the rotas for the next few weeks. I've already got a few teams set up for the hospice home. I've got ward team. I've got my NHS nursing team. Now I'm going to focus on the NHS nursing team because I know Lynn works as part of that team. And so I can see right at the moment, scheduled from Sunday 8 till 6 all the way through till Thursday. Now, if I wanted to change any of that, I can go in and make a quick amendment to this. So actually, we don't need to work quite so late on that day. I can give some more information about a shift. If I want to provide some structure, so every morning when you come on shift, you've got to go and catch up with the rest of the ward team that have been on the previous shift. Do that handover. So I might go and say, well, I'm going to add an activity here for handover for the first quarter of an hour of that particular shift, and then just into the run of the shifts. So I'll save that. And once we've made amendments to shifts, I can then say I want to go and share with the team. That's effectively publishing it out. What I also notice is that I haven't really got anything scheduled in for next week at the moment. So if I just want to repeat what I've already got, I'm saying I want to copy the current schedule across. So let's say I'm going to copy from this week and we'll paste it into next week. So to do the next 2 weeks in that way. Okay, so now that's going to take that same schedule and sort of map it out for another couple of weeks. Okay, I've got a slight clash there. Let's remove that one. Okay, so now for Lynn, I can see we've got the same sort of shift pattern into next week. So let me just share that. So by sharing it, I've now published it to all of the team members. Now, if I look at it from a perspective of Lynn, who's within one of those teams, again, I can go to shifts, but this time I only see the shifts that I'm involved in. I can see here's my current working pattern. If I look at the activity up here, I can see that a new shift's been published for the following week, things like that. But what I also have is this ability to sort of go and clock in. So I want to go and start my shift now. And by clocking in, it now sort of starts to record my time that I'm spending on that particular shift. So again, coming back to the governance side of things, using this could be quite a user adoption challenge. If you're going from paper-based time recording, timesheets, things like that, and now we're saying, all right, you need to have Teams on your phone. You need to use the Shifts app to clock in, to clock out, and things like that. Now, what I also have here is I've got a couple of open shifts. I need someone to do on call. So as the rota manager, in my previous screen, I can set up open shifts. I can say, I don't have anyone who's covering 3:15 onwards on Friday, and I've got an on-call shift on the Saturday. So I can leave those open if I wanted to. Now, as someone within that team, I can see those open shifts and I can say I want to go and request that shift. That basically generates an approval process for the team manager to be able to look at it and say, okay, fine, I'm happy for you to take that on because you've got some time off in between. I don't know if the face. So it goes through an approval process in that way. And we can also go through the requests option at the top here to say, well, it will show me the open requests that I've got, but I could also look at time off. So if you don't use annual leave booking through another system, you could do it through shifts as well. Now, quite recently, we're involved in a pre-sales call around shifts, and the client mentioned, well, actually, we use a third-party HR system. How can we get the annual leave from that into shifts? Well, there's two options. Within Power Automate, part of the Power Platform suite, there are actions that allow us to book time sort of against a shift for an individual. We're going to be reliant on an API, some way of interacting with the HR system, but most of the sort of HR systems have got that some form of API. When they're on a scheduled basis, I can say, go look for all annual leave, and we'll go and book it in weeks ahead. So as I'm going to pretend that we skipped almost to the end of the shift here. So at the end of my shift, I can just click on this clock and it's going to say, right, I'm going to stop the time on your shift at this point. Okay, so now I've clocked out for the day. From a time management perspective, the team owner can then go and export all of the shift data into Excel. So if I do need to go and get it into a payroll system, I've got a few different options. I can take a very manual approach to this and use the CSV that gets generated. In fact, let me just switch back. So here I'm the shift manager again. Now, I can look at this and say, go and export the time report. So I can specify the dates that I want it to include. So I could do it on a weekly basis, fortnightly, monthly, or whatever works for your team. And then I've got this Excel file which will show me when a shift started for an individual, when a shift ended, and the time actually recorded against that. So let me show you that quickly. Here we go. So here are my shifts. I can see down here at the bottom, this is where Lynn came on shift at 11:52. stayed around for 3 minutes and has now sort of clocked off. But I can see what the original shift was going to be, the time. Now we can start to manipulate that with sort of Excel if we want to sort of maintain a manual process. But also, again, coming back to the Power Automate side of things, if we wanted to make this more autonomous, there are actions that we can use that will then allow us to generate a CSV to put it into a payroll system if we wanted to. There's lots of different ways that, that we can do this. Some sort of more programmatically advanced, you could feed it directly in depending on APIs, that sort of thing. Right, just a quick look. Okay. Okay, so realise we're sort of coming up on the hour at the moment. So, are there any more questions at this point?
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions around shifts, Mike. One of the questions is, can we apply multiple group owners in shifts for multiple roster managers?
Yes, you can. Yeah. So the reason I've created my hospice resourcing team is that in that I can define team owners just the same way as you do if it was a standard Microsoft team, and then team members. So all the people that you need to manage for your rota, put them in as members, and then anyone who needs to be able to manage that roster, you put them in as owners. That way, yeah, any one of the owners can manage that and reorganize it, approve requests, approve swaps, approve open shifts, whereas the members can only interact with it in the way that my demo user Lynn was able to, just seeing her own shifts and the open ones. Okay. So I've got the question in front of me now, Gavin.
Yep.
Can shifts be used on a mobile? Yes, it can. So because it is plugged into Teams, people would have to have Teams on their mobile, but you can then use application policies for Teams to say that always have shifts on that left-hand sort of pinned bar, or always have it available, basically. So it makes it really easy for people to open it and to clock in that way. In shifts, is clock in optional or can it be ignored? Well, yes, it can be ignored, but within not recording your time. So if we've got another way, coming back to that user adoption, you might have a phased approach where, okay, I'm going to manage the roster within shifts. I'm going to print it out so people can view it. We'll still, for a time, accept paper-based, but we'd rather you use the clock in. So yes, it could be ignored, but it's to really sort of get the benefit, you'd have to go and clock in. And related to that, sorry, Robert's asking, if someone forgets to clock in, can we go back to clock in for the time they started? That's where we'd have to use that time export to be able to update it. Again, if we're transitioning it in and some people are still using a paper-based version, we could still say, well, let's go and update that exported timesheet view to be able to say, actually, they clocked in at 8 o'clock, or they forgot and now it's sort of midday. So you can amend it from that point. You can't retrospectively go in as the user and say clock in and rewind the clock 4 hours, so to speak. It's more of an admin task after the fact.
Good stuff, yeah. I think that's been really good. Again, if there's any questions that we've not answered, we can do so directly. So if you want to get in touch, we'll share contact details at the end of this anyway. We could almost do a full session on shifts. I think anyway, from some of the feedback we've had over the last few years, shift management, people management, roster management is a big thing in the hospice sector. We are aware of that. So yeah, hopefully that's helped a little bit and give a bit of a snippet.
Just on that, Gavin, if it is of interest to dive into shifts a little bit more, and maybe also the integration piece, we're currently looking at Breathe HR. How do we get annual leave from Breathe HR into shifts? How do we then get the time out into a formatted CSV ready to go to another system? If that whole end-to-end all things shifts is of interest, I'm happy to sort of put some demos together and go into that in more detail. Let us know in the feedback. Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Cheers, Mike. Thank you very much. Conscious of time, so again, thank you very much to everybody that attended and participated. Hope you found the session useful. The next webinar will be next Wednesday, same time, which is a deep dive into security, Microsoft compliance and data. So we're looking forward to that. And if anybody has got any questions, like I said, we'll be sharing contact details and a webinar recording for you to be able to share with your peers and contacts as well at the end of this. So looking forward to seeing everybody next week. And like I said, get in contact if you've got any queries or you just want to have a conversation about anything else technology-wise. So yeah, really appreciate it. Thanks for your time, Mike. Thanks for going through that. And thank you again to everybody who attended. Looking forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.